How's that for a warm welcome, Secretary Clinton? Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, and the timing is pretty incredible. Thank you all for being here to support Neighbors Link.
So we're going to start with a very easy question. It's been a few weeks since the election. How are you feeling about the future of our country?
Well, we could turn this into a big therapy session. Look, I was clearly very disappointed by the outcome for many, many reasons. And now we have to do what you're doing, coming together to figure out how we move forward to protect our values, our democracy, the kind of community that we cherish, our country, and it's not going to be easy. So I don't want to pretend otherwise. It's going to be very challenging. But this is not a time to despair or to feel that whatever actions each of us can take individually or collectively won't matter, because I just feel that everything we can do will matter to protect what we value. So, you know, it's not what I would wish for, not only not for us, but, you know, for my grandchildren. But that means we just have to kind of pull ourselves up and shake off the disappointment and the worries that are necessarily part of the new reality, and figure out what we're going to do and then pursue that.
So if we look at the situation worldwide, 120 million people last year were forced to flee their homes because of persecution, political and economic oppression, natural disasters. What trends do you think we need to be looking at as it relates to international migration as we think about what's happening in this country?
Well, you have to add climate change to your list, and I think...
Thanks, I forgot, yes.
Yeah, no, I think, Carola, that this is the largest number of displaced persons since the end of World War II, and there is no end in sight. Given the rise of repressive regimes, of both local and regional conflict, the ravages of climate change, obviously the connection all of that has with economic opportunity, the numbers of displaced people are very likely going to continue to grow. So we have to be aware of the pressures that will come from all of that huge movement of people, particularly in this hemisphere and to the south, in Africa, in South Asia, and we have to understand the political reaction that it causes, because we have been, you know, very slow to try to come up with workable solutions, and so we're even further behind in trying to understand that. When I say we, primarily the United States, Canada, and Europe, which are the destination points, but there are huge numbers of displaced people in so many parts of the world, and that is very destabilizing in those areas, and then that in turn causes more political reaction there in, you know, whether it's the Rohingya coming into Bangladesh, and now with what's happening in Bangladesh and what the consequences of that will be, and the list goes on and on. So this is an enormous global challenge, and I think it has led very directly to the rise of nationalism in Europe and this country, and watch Canada to the north. And there are good reasons for people to be concerned. It's not like this is made up. It's exploited, but it's not a totally made up concern on the part of what happens when you have so much displacement, and what happens to the people who have been displaced, what happens to the communities that they are moving into. So it's going to get worse, and the level of responsibility that's taken by national leaders and international organizations and leaders has just not kept pace with what we should be attempting to try to do.
And you say we've been slow to respond. You're absolutely right. And now we'll have the Trump administration who will act swiftly and aggressively. At Neighbors Link, we're certainly expecting and preparing for a whole slew of executive orders that will limit people's ability to stay in this country or to come into this country in drastic ways. Can you talk a little bit about how we should be thinking about defending and protecting the immigrant community?
Well, let me start by saying that, we have had several opportunities between 2007 and earlier this year to try to take action at the federal level in this country. When I was in the Senate, I voted for comprehensive immigration reform, which passed on a bipartisan basis. I think it was 2007. President George W. Bush said he would sign it. He was, quite vocally pro-immigrant and was willing to work with a bipartisan group in the Senate to draft that legislation. So it passed the Senate. The president said he would sign it. And it never got a vote in the House because they wanted to have an issue and a problem, not a solution. Fast forward, when Obama was president, same thing happened. Bipartisan group in the Senate worked on a more comprehensive approach. President Obama said he would work with them, he would sign it. No solution. And then just recently, another bipartisan group of senators, including some of the more conservative Republicans, worked on a stripped-down version that was primarily focused on security issues, and Trump basically ordered them not to proceed. So we have attempted, and when I say we, I include a bipartisan group of leaders, both three presidents, including President Biden, and Republican and Democratic senators to try to take action. And in both cases, in the earlier times with Bush and Obama, the House Republicans refused to act. And now, under the direction of Trump, the Senate backed down as well. So I think we have to recognize that this issue, which, as I say, has not been addressed the way that it should have been in order to be humane and fair and just with respect to immigrants, but also recognize the legitimate concerns of people who get quite agitated, and now those people have been whipped up for political purposes. So we are in a very volatile situation. And I don't know exactly how this will unfold, but I took a stab at it in the book I recently published, Something Lost, Something Gained, and tried to ask people to imagine what it would be like waking up, in the Trump administration, knowing what he has promised to do, knowing the people he is intending to put in charge of his effort to deport millions of people who are here. So I don't think anybody should be surprised or complacent in any way. They are going to vigorously try to deport people, for them, it is a political imperative, and it's also theater. And so you have to just understand that we're going to be seeing a lot of very disturbing images in communities across our country. And therefore, it falls on all of us who, look, I want a system of comprehensive immigration reform. I am for secure borders. I do not think anybody who shows up at our border should be automatically admitted. I outlined in both my presidential campaigns how I would go about doing this. I also want a path for citizenship for everyone who's here. I want to finalize the legality of DACA. I mean, there are lots of pieces of this that we should still keep working on, even in the face of what will be this very aggressive set of actions. So when I think about it, I think that people who want to protect the immigrant community in our country have to be focused and ruthless to do everything within the law to try to achieve that. Because they haven't changed the law yet, so they have to work within the law. Now, they will skirt it, they will try to ignore it, they will undermine it, they may even try to force through executive action changes in the law that I don't think they have the power to do through executive action. So lawyers need to be on call, basically, on speed dial. It was like with the Muslim ban, when lawyers mobilized, law students mobilized and used the law to stop what was happening then. It has to be the same in the face of all of this. On a practical level, people who have green cards should be today getting into the process to try to achieve residency. People who have residency, make sure you have illegal residency, make sure you have every document that you need. People who were born in this country, make sure you know where your birth certificate is. I mean, this is a full court press to try to get people who are most at risk to understand what they can do to protect themselves, and then to get groups like Neighbors Link and so many others, lawyers, organizers, community outreach workers, to be well prepared to take whatever action can be taken within the law to try to protect the people who are here.
And to your point, we saw some of this in the first Trump administration, but I think it's really important to comment on the fact that this is going to be different. And could you say a few words about the level of intensity we could expect?
Well, I do think it's going to be different. I think, the people that he has tapped to run this are, very determined and extremely outspoken about their mission, whether it's Steve Miller or Homan or any of the others. Their mission, as they understand it, is literally to round up and deport as many people as possible. Now, I say that without adding who are here without documentation, because there is no master list of who is here without documentation. So what they will do is more of a kind of dragnet roundup. People who look like maybe they don't have documents. People who somebody calls and tells them does not have documents. And like I say, there's going to be a lot of theater. So there are going to be raids. There'll be raids into all kinds of establishments. There will also be a lot of economic interests who are going to be trying to cut deals as quickly as they can. You know, are they really going to take every farm worker out of the field? Are they really going to take every construction worker off of every scaffolding? You almost have to try to figure out who are your allies, who might be able to prevent this from happening. And the agriculture industry, the construction industry, those are just two that could be effective allies in throwing a lot of wrenches into the gears. So I cannot, sitting here today, predict to you how this is going to play out, but I think you have to, everyone, we all have to use our imaginations about what could happen and then be prepared in every way we can now imagine and then execute to try to prevent as much as possible from actually occurring.
So in your book, you talk about the extraordinary work that your team did helping women from Afghanistan evacuate after the Taliban took power. And I bring this up, that piece was particularly meaningful. I reread that chapter in your book because at Neighbors Link, we helped people also evacuate from Afghanistan, and today our legal team is providing legal services to those that are in this country. And what struck me about it, along the lines of what we're talking about, is the fact that the people in this country are in a very fragile position, especially those like from Afghanistan who are here on very temporary programs, humanitarian parole, for example. And so absolutely at risk of being deported quickly. I'm wondering if you could tell the room a little bit more about these temporary programs and then also about the importance of having some legal pathway to citizenship for the people in this country.
Well, you know, when we were working to evacuate Afghan women and their families, it was because they were not, the women we were aimed at were not women who had worked directly for the American government, either the military or the embassy or development projects. They didn't have that linkage. They were women who were running schools, who were working in the Afghan government, who were, who had started businesses. They were journalists, and they were women who whom I had met over the years, who were incredibly inspiring because they were trying to build a democracy in Afghanistan. So they were not going to be evacuated by the United States government under a special U.S. government visa requirement, a special visa that was basically the entree for the about 128,000 people that the U.S. government directly evacuated. So we and many others had to figure out ways to get those women out and their families, and it was something that I describe in the book, an incredibly heroic effort on the part of so many people. But then we had to find places for them to go because they didn't have visas to come to the United States, although the United States was their hoped-for final destination. So we had to work with other governments, and we had to also work with governments that were willing to take them on a legal path. Canada took, I think, about 20,000 at the end. And so I was calling, heads of government around the world, trying to get them to take these women, and the biggest number went to Albania, and they went there then to be processed. Some went to Germany, some went elsewhere in Europe, and a good number came to the United States. But they came under like TPS, temporary protected status, or humanitarian parole. But they had to be, vetted outside of the country before they were let in. Now, some we actually did get on American planes, and they ended up in America to start with, but then they still had to go through the process here in this country. So we have, and the same thing happened with like the Venezuelans who were coming primarily over the last few years, many of which, as we know, ended up in New York, and they couldn't work, and they wanted to work, and that was one of the arguments we made to get them TPS status. We have, you know, still we have people from Haiti, we have people from Central America who came because of either political repression or natural disaster, who are on TPS. And TPS has to be renewed, and TPS can be taken away. So one of our big concerns is how the Trump administration will deal with TPS or humanitarian parole, and whether they will do it en masse and thereby making Afghans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, whomever, very vulnerable, or take some other approach. We just don't know at this point.
And so public perception on immigration has really shifted in the past decade. Can you talk to us a little bit about how we should be talking about immigration in order to reach a broader audience in this country?
Well, we should be talking about it the way we historically have talked about, you know, the United States being a nation of immigrants. And we've had other periods in our history where we became anti-immigrant. The Chinese Exclusion Act, obviously, the Japanese internment, you know, other points where the government, mostly under political pressure, would, you know, pull back from legal immigration, or from enforcing, you know, or from trying to get, you know, fixes to the law that were needed. So we've had other periods like that. But, I mean, we really are facing a kind of alternative reality that has been created for political purposes. It is not the reality of what is going on in our country. Why are so many people here? Largely because somebody will employ them. Why then don't you go after the employers? Well, that's just politically not feasible. So instead, you go after the immigrants. I mean, the disgraceful treatment of the legal Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio during the campaign, the allegations about, you know, eating cats and dogs. They were in this country legally, and they were recruited to Springfield, Ohio to work in plants that could not find other people, namely native-born Americans, to work in. A few years ago, Alabama passed a law which said no immigrant, legal or illegal, can work in agriculture in Alabama. Like within 6 months, you know, the farmers in Alabama were in revolt. And so immigrants serve a very important economic purpose in our country. And the idea that they are taking, you know, all these jobs has a little bit of truth. I mean, you always have to be, you know, fair and acknowledge the truth that, you know, in some places that is true because they can be exploited, and they often are not protected, and they are often underpaid. But that's a problem of us not enforcing the laws. That's not a problem of them being willing to do the work that they are offered. And so we just have gotten off onto a, you know, political tirade about immigrants without recognizing the reality of why immigrants keep coming to this country, yes, seeking safety and security, but also economic opportunity. We also, like every other advanced country, we have a demographic problem. We are not replacing ourselves. Our birth rate among so-called native-born Americans is not replacing itself. The exception is immigrants. I mean, one of the reasons that the United States' population has not stalled out the way you see in Japan or Italy or Germany and most of the rest of the advanced economic world is because we've had so many immigrants. And those immigrants have contributed to our population. And they've also contributed to our tax rolls. And they pay into Social Security, and they, pay other taxes, whether it's, sales taxes or other kinds of taxes that go to the, common support of the government. So there are a lot of really positive arguments, but they don't get through. I mean, one thing we learned really painfully again in this election is that talking about reality, facts, evidence is just not in fashion. And talking in reasonable tones, the way I thought you were supposed to when you were like an adult, totally boring. We are now living in an era of entertainment politics. And the people who are part of that entertainment industry, not just the politicians, but the people who support them, are really good at getting attention. And they have a whole separate information ecosystem that communicates directly with half the country. And that half of the country gets only a particular point of view, day in and day out. And when you say, but no, immigrants pay taxes, even people without documents pay taxes, they say, I don't believe you. That's not true. That's not what I've heard. Well, of course, because what you've heard is a distorted political argument to get you to a certain point of view. So you haven't heard both sides. You've only heard the propaganda side that supports the political agenda. So we have a lot of challenges that we have to figure out how to deal with, this being one of many. But because the human costs can be so great starting on January 20th. I mean, they say they're going to start the roundups as soon as he takes the oath of office. So this is, the reality in which we will now be living. And the only, additional point I'd make is maybe, again, if you don't get your information from reliable sources, you might not even see the worst of what might be happening. So how do we get that information out? How do we all become sort of our own, individual journalists with our own phones and our own contacts and our own social media, so that at least we try to get a more accurate picture of what's actually going on, so that then maybe, people can respond.
It's very sobering. We've touched a lot on the economic benefits of immigration, and you've started to talk a little bit about the family units. Could you just talk for a few minutes about the mixed statuses that exist within family units, and what happens in those situations as this next administration considers mass deportations?
This is so depressing. I mean, it's just a big dining room filled with wonderful people, and go ahead, hit them again. Trump has said on several occasions that he wants to do away with birthright citizenship. And if you follow, and I don't recommend this unless you are a glutton for punishment like me, but if you follow the right-wing sort of think tank world, they are just working overtime to figure out how they can undermine birthright citizenship, which is in the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and coming up with all kinds of crazy theories about why it doesn't apply to everybody who was born here, and trying to construct a legal argument that could get them to the Supreme Court with the hope that 5 of those very radical right-wing justices would agree with them. So that's the first problem. Because otherwise, the mixed status is generally a child born in the United States who therefore has citizenship, and parents and siblings who do not. And what Homan, the guy that is being put in charge of the deportation efforts, has said is that we won't break up families, we will deport them all. So even if you have, let's say you have a family of 5, 2 parents, 3 siblings, the 2 parents, the oldest sibling, not born here, not documented, and you have 2 children born here. Now, legally, historically, the 2 children born here, there shouldn't even be a question about it. What Homan is saying is that the parents committed an illegal act by birthing children in the United States, so therefore the whole family goes. So, I mean, there'll be a lot of argument about birthright citizenship, about, you know, blended status families, but I don't think, as I said earlier, there's a master list. They're going to take everybody. And they're going to justify taking everybody from mixed status families so that they, quote, don't separate the families. Because what they did the first time with their brutal, you know, family separation policy was so outrageous that even it couldn't be sustained. So that the lesson they've learned from that is not, don't, you know, break up families, it's deport the whole family. So I think that is their mindset right now. The other thing, though, that is really horrifying is that the governor of Texas has said he's really looking forward to being a full partner with the Trump administration. And Texas, I've heard, is already identifying land where you can put big temporary camps. And that the stock of one of the companies that has the capacity to build big temporary camps is like through the roof. Because the people who will be rounded up will be, in the first instances, sent to holding camps. Because it will be difficult to push them across the border into Mexico. And, you know, the Mexican government is obviously, you know, fighting back on this, but they will be rounded up and held in these camps, as I understand it.
So it's all very challenging. I will say, though, that in this room there are 430 of my best friends, and we are ready to move forward. So I'm hopeful. All the people that came to listen to this, and the people that work at Neighbors Link and the organizations that we partner with that are dedicated to making a difference. But I'm wondering if you can give the room some real concrete examples of what they can be doing as we move forward.
Look, I think that's going to determine whether the plans of this administration succeed or fail, and we all, you know, want to force them to have to take legal action to reform our laws, to have whatever we're going to need to have a humane, effective, secure immigration system is what we should be working on. But, you know, that's hard, that's complicated, that takes work, and it's not entertaining. So we have to push them to that point where that becomes the fallback default by causing as much interference as we possibly can with their plans. And that includes, you know, using every legal tactic available under the law, which means that, you know, we have to rely, obviously, on groups like yours, which has done so much in providing legal assistance. We have to recruit more lawyers who are willing to participate, law students, others who, you know, have, are given, you know, a portfolio about what to do in certain circumstances so that they can try to, you know, postpone insofar as possible some of these actions. So, I mean, this has to be a campaign, in effect. I mean, you have to be prepared to really fight back in whatever way you're capable of or you feel comfortable. And obviously through organizations like Neighbors Link. You know, I'm hoping that when this all begins and when we see people literally being dragged out of, you know, restaurants and off of construction sites and out of people's yards or offices or factories, wherever these raids are going to happen, that it will cause enough people in positions of leadership and in the public generally to have a reaction, say, no, that's not what we thought. You know, that's not what we signed on for. That's not what we expected. You know, you're now seeing all over social media people who voted for Trump saying, well, he's not going to come for my family because, you know, he's only going to go for the people who broke the law. Well, if you're not here with documentation, they're going to argue you broke the law. But, you know, I read an interview with a woman who is not documented. Half her family is not documented. They, you know, the ones who could vote voted, you know, for Trump. Her children who could vote voted for Trump at her urging for whatever combination of reasons, because she doesn't think it applies to her. It applies to, you know, somebody else. There's some other group of people out there that are undesirable, but not me and my family. We work hard and we follow the law. So they're not going to come for us. But in a dragnet operation like what they're talking about, yes, they're going to come for all kinds of people who don't think that they are in that category. And those people will have relationships. They'll have employers. They'll have friends. They'll have, you know, churches. They'll, you know, all of that will be happening. And so that's when I hope the reaction begins. So you have to be ready in a kind of hold the line operation and then be ready to, you know, move beyond that to try to pivot to say, okay, look, that didn't work. Why don't we get back to actually doing what we should do, which is having laws that everybody understands and follows, and we then have sensible ways of making determinations about people. And by the way, let's have a path to citizenship for the 11 million who are here. They haven't committed, you know, felonies or whatever the qualification should be. Let's get about that business and actually, you know, recognize that they have families, they have small businesses, they are employed, they are making contributions, they're paying their taxes, and get back to what should be the conversation. I mean, if Trump had basically said, I'm going to lead the toughest immigration reform ever, you know, people would have said, okay, that's fair. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, you're supposed to make laws that we can all live under. But that's not how this is being approached. So I just urge everybody here to be as proactive as you can be. And for the people that you might know who are not documented, if there's anything that can be done to help them with their legal status quickly or some other kind of action that can be taken. You've got experts at Neighbors Link and elsewhere who can advise you. Green card people, urge them to get the paperwork started if they can. You know, just whatever can be done to protect your status now. And I would say, I don't know, you may know, Carola, I mean, there may be out of that 11.5, 12 million people, I don't know, 40% who could do something about their status immediately to try to help themselves. But whatever it is, we should take action like that.
I think there's little that people can do to improve their status. I think there's very little that people can do in the short term.
Even with, like, if you were in a green card situation, applying for legal residency, having that paperwork, knowing that, because they're going to come for green card people.
Right. Well, if you have your green card and you've held it for the right amount of time and you can get your citizenship, absolutely. If you can get your DACA renewed, that's a good idea, certainly. I think the most hope that people will have that are undocumented is to try to avoid the expedited removal, which is to make sure that they at least have their due process rights, so that those that have been in the country for more than 2 years are able to prove that. And if they can prove it, then they at least have the opportunity to go before a judge, an immigration judge, to make their case. So if you know folks who have been in this country for 2 years or more, helping them get that documentation so that they can prove that they've actually been here at least gives them the opportunity to make sure that they can go before an immigration judge. Under 2 years, then you can be a victim of expedited removal, which means then our government can deport you and you don't have the right to make your case in front of a judge. So,
yeah, but one thing about the 2 years, I mean, most of us have no idea where our documents are. I have no idea where my birth certificate is. I may not even have been born here. I don't know. I couldn't prove it. If they come for me, I don't know what I'm going to do. I better go home and find it. But seriously, help people get whatever documentation they've got, especially if they are at that 2-year, beyond the 2-year cutoff. Get employment records, get pay stubs, get rental agreements, get whatever you can get. Help them get that and put it together, because that will slow down the process. I mean, that's the kind of practical stuff that, Neighbors Link will be telling people.
that's right. And if they've been here under 2 years, it's good to start creating that log of information, because it may take some time before you fall victim to being removed from the country, and by then maybe you will have hit your 2 years. I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, now you can enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton.